and welcome to Making Drupal Friendly for Editors and Clients. Drupal's extensibility allows us to create the perfect CMS for whatever we need to build, but too often that same level of design isn't put into the back-end and editorial interfaces. So I hope you leave this session with ideas for taming content forms, for building out useful content dashboards, and enhancing editorial workflows. My name is Jim Vomero, and I'm a senior engineer at 4 Kitchens. I have over 10 years of Drupal experience, and I use the CMS for all my nerdy hobbies, from collecting brewery data for calculations for making homebrew, to planning retro arcade projects, to teaching kids to prepare for the zombie apocalypse at summer camps I run in the Philadelphia area. If you have any questions after this presentation, I would love to connect. I'm always excited to talk shop and would love to keep this conversation going. I'm a web chef at 4 Kitchens. We build websites and applications for organizations that depend on large-scale or unconventional content. We work in publishing, with associations, enterprise organizations, in the media and higher ed. Our clients include NBC Universal, PRI, Entertainment Weekly, Stanford, Yale, NYU, among many others. And we make big websites. Every Drupal site has a very different and very custom content model. And what makes our sites unique also makes it very challenging to standardize our editorial processes and to standardize our trainings. And this can put us at a huge disadvantage over other CMSs. So let's consider WordPress. This screenshot is from 2011. You'll see the left sidebar has post pages, media, link, and other features that are fairly common for managing content. And the right side includes this out-of-the-box interface for content publishing settings, so draft, view, visibility, etc. Let's fast forward from 2011 to 2014, WordPress 3.7. The interface became a little bit more modern, kind of a facelift, but it's all the same controls in the same place and operates the same way. And here's the screenshot I took a couple of weeks ago. Now in 2019, Gutenberg certainly created a more rich editorial tool set, but largely we see the same menus, labels, form elements, all those across the editorial interface. And while certainly WordPress doesn't hold a candle to some of the other fun tools coming out, the ability to have a consistent UI has helped us train so much better. If you're used to a WordPress site from 10 years ago, you'll probably be fine today. There's a lot of reasons I'll choose Drupal over WordPress for a project. For me, Drupal's strengths are its flexibility, but there's a price that comes with that extensibility. So having non-standard tools means reinventing the wheel and just larger gaps in training and planning resources. Luckily, all that flexibility that we use to build out our sites can be used in our backends as well. And so I always say that sometimes node is a 4-letter word, like one of those things you're not allowed to say, a taboo phrase with polite company. And as site builders, I'm assuming that's my audience here today, we know what powers our sites. There's a menu system, a block layout system, maybe we use paragraphs, or there's items coded in a component library and templates, taxonomy, entity queues, dynamic relationships. But it breaks my heart when clients need to learn to use these words to describe their website, because really, they're just asking, can I edit that? Or how do I edit that? Or can I edit this thing? How do I put something somewhere? I have this embed code. Why can't I paste it? Or what really hurts is when they say, oh, it's so easy to do in this other system. Yeah, it probably is. Making Drupal friendly means checking all these words like node and taxonomy and blocks and all that jargon at the door, and building out interfaces that are just intuitive and distraction-free. And so this means personalizing the editorial experience. This starts with user stories. I love and hate watching my site owners actually use the site. I learn a lot by watching their workarounds. When they're using an interface in some way you never intended it to be done, but they get the job done anyways. So I would say start by watching your users and see what they do and how they use their site, where their frustrations lie. Like it or not, their frustrations or their workarounds are the correct way of doing it, even if it's not what you intended. So let's start to embrace those. And actually, the rest of this presentation is centered around real user stories from sites that I've been a part of. When I made this presentation a year ago, it was a module roundup, because there's a lot of modules that will do the things I'm going to show you. And I realized that that's overload, and you can Google it or email me. So I'd rather show you the end result of what problems we were solving, but feel free to ask questions at the end if you want to know how we did something. So let's start. Very first experience for editors, how do I log in? That's a great question. Login screen is the first impression, so let's make it a good one. It pains me to have to explain, well, you just go to your website and then you type /user and then you get this highly intuitive login interface. We could do better than that. And in fact, in this case, user is one of those 4-letter words. So let's remove some barriers by creating a readily available login link. For some sites, this might be a link in the footer, but that, of course, will probably be on every page. So other sites, it might appear as a custom landing page. And the example I have on the screen was for a university website where there was a student portal login link. This not only allowed us to hide the login link during maintenance mode, but gave us some contextual information to help them along the way. So this link would be replaced with an error message if there were any login problems. And the URL to this page was memorable. We went with /login. Or if you have to, maybe you're in a WordPress friendly shop, I've been picking on them today, that's fine. You can go /WP admin or WP login, completely valid. So feel free to create a landing page, I would suggest, or at the very least create a memorable login link. This is a huge and simple win. One cautionary note, it's always best practice to make it a little difficult to log in for your users. So the easier you make the login link, the more spam you're going to see to this form, but that's a problem no matter what. So robots are going to hit you. So if you make it more easy, they're going to hit you more often. Diving more into the login interface, this is the default user login form. There's a lot you can do to improve this. These are just some small changes. So customizing the login form, it's a form like any other in Drupal. You can edit it. You can manipulate the components, edit the components. And so this was for a web conference site that I built, and it says, username, your web conference username, and password. And I can't read it from here, but the password that goes with your username. This isn't helpful for me. So a couple of quick tweaks just to make the username field read a little clearer. Put the password information along with the login link as the descriptive text of the field. I found easy wins. And something else that you'll see is a constant theme of my slide is putting links to help readily available. So putting it right at the bottom of the form, because users are going to have issues, so give them that outlet or they will be frustrated. Continuing the login experience, they've made it through. Maybe you didn't even need to use that form. I embrace a good single sign-on service whenever I can. They're in the site. What is the first thing they see? The user page, which is very unuseful for almost every site I build. It's kind of neat to know that I was a member of the site for 2 years and 7 months, but ultimately it doesn't help. So on login, Drupal redirects the user to this profile page, and instead choose a more useful location based on whatever your users are going to be doing. And you can use this as a set of rules or custom code to say, hey, our editors need to go to this dashboard, but our general site contributors, they are going to go to the home page. Or our top-level reporting team just wants to see a view of everything that changed in the last week. I'm going to go through some examples of what those places might be. But keep in mind that once logging in, make that action useful. The rules module is nice for this. I've also used Rabbit Hole in the past to just let folks not see their user page if they don't need to actually view it, and then put the edit link somewhere else useful. And the final note on logging in, what are they seeing? What is that first flavor? Admin themes are a great way to provide some continuity between the back-end experience, and it's also something you can use on a series of sites. If you use the same or similar admin theme, they start to feel comfortable. Oh, this is Drupal. Not every site has to be completely different. These are 3 I use regularly. Adminimal, I believe, is the #1 contrib admin theme, and so it's well supported. It's built on 7. The middle one is Thunder. Thunder has a lot of interesting tools worth checking out. It is a distribution on its own, but they've rolled out the theme if you want to include that on your site. So there's some support for media and for paragraphs and just some other nuanced changes that I really love. And the last one is 42. And 42, I use it somewhat regularly. What I love about it is it has more space. It's not based on 7, it's its own thing, and I feel like a designer really created it first and then it was developed. A lot of the other ones, to me, feel like a programmer came up with them. And that's not bad, but I just feel like it shows. All right, second topic. Folks are logged in. What are they seeing? And this is one that I get excited about, the idea of having dashboards. And this is a tool set of reports that maybe be helpful to your editors, your content owners. And this could be a single interface or a collection of them. So some examples and some user stories that we've had in the past is you're taken to a page. What do? So a dashboard here, I say it replaces the default content overview page. This one drives me nuts. Because Drupal is made to be useful no matter what your content model is, we have some very generic interfaces. So you're very familiar with admin slash content. Is that it? And that's great. It's a pathway to your content, but in and of itself, it's so generic. So I typically replace this with a dashboard of my own, often per content type or per type of content. So this is an example of replacing that with a managed news dashboard. And a few features that make this, to me, a lot more useful is I was able to pull the fields from that content that were useful. And in some cases, it might not be super obvious what we've changed here. The image on the left, of course, that's nice. That's a way of saying that, hey, does every one of our news stories actually have an image, and kind of identify the ones where they forgot. And then when we get to author, that one's interesting because for our news type, author is an entity reference on this site. It's not the actual person who authored the page, which if they were from some sort of import might be admin or some user they don't even know about. So replacing that with author. I'll also sometimes start hiding fields that don't make sense. In this case, they were using the status, the promoted, and a set of taxonomy tags so we can see which was tagged with what. But I'll describe what each one of these columns are. This is a simple view. So I'm going to assume most folks in this room know how to use views. You can knock this out fairly quick, and I think it's an easy win. Putting the instructions at the top has been very helpful, but I encourage you to let the folks who are going to use this dashboard write the instructions using their jargon to define what's on this page. Another example of this is how you can prioritize tasks with these dashboards. And in this case, this is just a custom template, but almost everything on here is a block or a view. And so the top block is a series of add content links, and it's maybe a medium-sized programming task to say, give me a list of all the content that I have the ability to add. But it's nothing too challenging to throw that in a block. And we put an icon behind each one just to make it a little more friendly and a little more approachable. Of course, there's a lot more governance rules in what icon you use for a post versus a news story. Wow, you can have some detailed conversations in that. But ultimately, folks really liked it. It was a nice win. It made the CMS feel more friendly. And for this site, the user stories were kind of particular. The client was paranoid that when they published something, it wasn't live. And I never knew what that meant. I was like, well, it says published on the dashboard. Yeah, but is it live? So I gave them this view, which was popular today. How many times was something viewed today? And that meant they published something, they put a link out on social media, and it's giving them validation that someone actually clicked on the link. In all reality, it might have been themselves clicking on the link, but they really needed that. And the second was recently changed, and this is the user story. What was I working on yesterday? So I log in, and it's right there. It gives me however many hours or days ago, the top 5 or 10 or whatever makes the most sense. And I cut it off here, but these were just some other blocks to links. So requesting help is one I suggest you put in that editorial dashboard if you create one. There's to be a block at the bottom of the page of all your editorial interfaces that just says, who do I reach out to for help? In this case, we actually included a simple web form that sent off an email to their Jira system, so it created a new ticket, and it logged what browser the user was using, who they were logged in as, so we were kind of sneaky in that we got some diagnostic information every time they asked for help. Along with other things about the voice and the tone and how to use the CMS, which was also in a Confluence wiki spaces, but we included it right here, so they had one canonical place to go for all the information related to editorial needs. I told you a little bit about my summer camps, and so I have a lot of examples from them because I could freely share those examples. That's my website. We personalize our dashboards by servicing relevant content based on the user. And so for our camp instructors, they have 2 important needs, and I have one for them. So the 3 things are, I need to pay you, I need to know your address. We hire a lot of college students that might move over the course of the summer, and I need to know where to send their tax information and where to send their payments. So front and center, as soon as they log in, there's their contact information with an edit link. Below that, there is my schedule, and below that, cut off from this screenshot, is my timesheets. And so it's the 2 most important things. Where am I working and when am I getting paid? These are views, and if you were to click through the menus of this staff portal, you'll get a more complete view of all those folks' schedules. But at least here, on initial login, they are seeing the most relevant information to them, and I can change it per role. So if you're one of our camp management staff, you see everybody's schedule, and if you're one of the instructors, you just see your own. If you're my finance team that pays the bills, you actually see any pending time cards at the top of the dashboard. Dashboards are useful for commonly referenced data sets. This was a web conference I worked on, and we had proposals coming in, of course, all during the last 24 hours of of call for proposals, and we needed a way to review these. So it was a list of the most important fields of the node, just using views. We used the 5-star module so you can see the votes in line in aggregate and see your own score, and also see a comment count. That way if there were 0 and now you come back and you see some more, it might alert you to, oh, there's some new ones, let's check this out. This was a nice roll-up interface, and folks could click through to read more on that session, but they could also then, I think in time we added a taxonomy filter, so as we were building tracks, we could see which ones we would want in each track. Much more useful than that typical content dashboard, which is just unfortunately generic. Oh, I should also mention, this one we exported as a file feed too, because there was a lot of folks who needed to work in Google Docs. So being able to export the session information as CSVs was very, very useful. And I think I have a slide about that as well. Using exposed filters and arguments isn't anything new. If you're used to using views and you're creating these dashboards, feel free to use them. There's a lot of power in being able to add these filters, and feel free to customize them as well. The one here is a autocomplete list, and sometimes because of the nature of views, you can't get a select list, but that's a simple form alter. You can use your views alter hook to say replace one of these inputs with whatever might make the most sense for you. So I'm not going to preach too much other than it's a view. You can add filters. And views bulk operations. That is a module. I think views actions might be in core, but action is another one. Allow you to perform routine actions over a large set of content. It's also very easy to create your own action plugins. This is, once again, a pretty medium-sized programming task. It's, I believe, 2 files, maybe 1 file, that you add in a custom module that says, for each node passed to this action, let's do some content. So when I travel, I like to visit a bunch of breweries. This is my brewery logging website. And I have an action that geolocates these things, and I have an action that grabs a recent map or an image from Yelp. And when I want to update these, this is a simple view, but using the action plugin, which comes with Drupal core, I was able to create a custom action where checking off 3, 4, 5 or the entire set, and then up in the upper left-hand corner to say what action I should take. Maybe publish, maybe fetch new Yelp data, fetch a new image. Anything you want to do over a series of fields. It's also easy to create a confirmation step. So are you sure you want to delete these 30 nodes or whatever that might be? It actually deletes one that comes with content in core. Cloning tools create duplicate content, and this is with the entity clone module, and you can even pre-populate some of these fields if you like. So one example of this for my summer camps is our events. We might host our Rebel Girl Adventure Camp in 10 different locations, and we build out the content for one of these events, and then I hit the entity clone button, or right from this dashboard, and it creates a new instance, and I only need to change the date, or maybe the location, or the staff working at that event, but the other 30 fields remain populated with the previous content. It's a module I've been very happy with. I've also used this for a ticketing system. If 3 people come in, all with the same issue, and the help desk staff needed to create multiple tickets, hit clone, change the one detail, hit clone, change the one detail. Draggable interfaces is a fun one. It allows you to create weights in views and saves that weight as sort of a metadata that you can sort off of. In this example, we didn't want to give editors access to the menu system. Menu permissions in Drupal are kind of all or nothing, and it's a little intense and sometimes dangerous because you can mess up your information architecture. So in this case, we had the menu being built based on the node weight, and we created a custom view. So the only thing our editors were allowed to do were to move pages up or down in this dashboard, and it would reflect that in the menu system. Draggable interfaces, or I'm sorry, the weights module doesn't do anything out of the box as far as actionable things on your site, but it does give you a framework for making those kind of changes. Views, entity form fields, and toggle editable fields. This lets you put editing right inside a view. So if you'd like to edit a number of nodes all at once, let's see, on this example, it is setting assignments for my summer camp staff, who's working on which week. I could click on every event and hit edit, or I could just see the upcoming week in this view. This view shows every camp for next week, and change the folks right in line. I've also found this very useful for, say, contact information. You have a board of directors, and there's a person type node, and you want to just update email addresses or phone numbers. You can create one dashboard with all this content without having to routinely click around to each one. And I have a lot more stories. So I have 2 slides that are just dumps of things that may be of useful to you. I'll put my slides up online, but to give a couple of shout outs, what are the meta tags for each landing page? This is sort of my encouragement of not all the dashboards have to be for all the users. Maybe you have someone focused on SEO and they need a dashboard just for meta information. Or I think maybe on the next slide I have an audit of all the alt text you've used on images. Yeah, there it is. What is all the alt text for images across the site? That is a view we can create. It's certainly more of a reactive way for accessibility, but let's create a view of any image or asset that was updated in the last week, and someone could spot check, are we still using appropriate alt text, or does someone need maybe a little bit better training? Stale content. That was a fun example. We were working on e-commerce site, and there was some legal reasons why certain fields needed to be updated annually. So it was a view of just any of these product pages that were not edited in 1 year. And they would show up, and the editor could make a superficial change, click save, and it would go back away from the queue for the next year. So stale content was a fun one. Performance, you can start doing things like measuring traffic of pages if you want to get into that type of integration. Announcements are fun. In a few sites recently, we've added just a configuration field where you can leave announcements at the top of the dashboard for your editors logging in. Hey, we're going to have a maintenance window, or this training's available, or now we allow YouTube embeds, whatever that might be. So having that consistent space to communicate. Support I mentioned, having help forms or at least help text. And then this last one I had to throw an asterisk by. Where can I find my content? And my content, I just don't know what that means. I struggle on every site. Sometimes it means the content I edited. Sometimes it means the content I authored. Or maybe I'm using the groups module and it's the content that's in the same group that I am in. So I encourage you to find out what that means for your organization before you commit to the word my. It's an interesting challenge to solve. And that is my first part on dashboards. It's actually my favorite part, and I find that they are huge wins for our content team. Pardon me. Second part is taming forms. So field types, widgets, formatters. This is how the fields work when you're looking at your content items. There are a lot of content types available in Drupal core and then with Contrib, so get to know them and use the right tool for the job. You know, there's boolean, date, link, number, options, reference, telephone fields, text fields. Yes, I do, actually. Pardon me. If I see any of these abused more often, it is the text field. So phone number. Just left as a text field, of course, leaves a lot to the imagination. Or is there an area code? Dashes, dots, extensions, letters. Having a phone number field, it exists as a Contrib module, or is that one in core? I think it's still a Contrib, but link is definitely in core. Leaving that as a text field, of course, you want a relative link, absolute link, and Twitter is the one that hurts me the most because when I see, what's your Twitter? Do you mean with the @ sign, without? Do you want the full path? And if you don't know, I mean, you're going to get an assortment of answers. Price, of course, has currency and decimals and things of that nature. Dates, I think there's just no excuse. There are date pickers that are better than text. And address is just sort of a, here's a field, you figure it out. Some of these fields add markup that will make your user interface better. Darn. My apologies. So in this example, we have email, phone, and date fields using HTML5 markup to provide better inputs to your end users. These are things we probably already use on the front end of our site. No reason we can't use them on the back end as well. Linkit is another solution for internal linking. Editors shouldn't have to go find the node ID of a page and then remember that node to figure out which one you're linking to. You see this often in autocomplete fields where there was a block on one website called important information, and I think there was like 30 of these blocks that existed. And so when you're doing an autocomplete and you started to type the word important information, the autocomplete would just fill up and they all look the same, and we'd have to describe to people, well, find out what node ID you want, and that's the one you're supposed to click on. Well, Linkit was a great solution because it allows you to customize what happens in that autocomplete, providing maybe author information, associated metadata, So you get kind of a teaser, and you get to present what you're linking to. It also has a lot of options for WYSIWYG management of links or the field itself. And there's just something I saw Luke speak about in UX, talking about drop-downs being the UI of last resort. There's a lot of alternatives in Drupal. So the one all the way on the right is one I've gotten a lot of use out of, which is Chosen. Although I will say, some of the Chosen interfaces have accessibility issues. So test them as you go. Pardon me. What's been nice about Chosen is it provides a nice alternative where someone can start to type, and it provides either a select list option or a tagging option. So this would give your editors just a little bit more control over what's presented to them, and it's not a dump to the screen.
Have you messed with other select list JavaScript libraries?
I have, and none of them are popping in my mind right now. So does anyone else have any recommendations?
I've seen like Select 2, I think is one.
Well, I think we used Select 2 on the last site because of some accessibility issues that were in Chosen.
What's the name of that module that builds those like column ones? You've got 2 columns.
Right. Let's see. The 2 columns. I did not write that one down, but if you hit me up, I know I have it written down somewhere. Computed fields populate based on programmatic logic. So, well, this is embarrassing.
Do you maybe a thing?
No, I just did something. This is an example of my summer camp's time cards. So they will fill out their mileage and the hours they worked on per day basis, and that's the fields you see at the bottom. But I need to aggregate that. And of course I could, in a template or somewhere else, just add values together and display it on the screen. But this is more sensitive time information. And so in this case, I actually want to be able to select on, review, filter, and do other calculations based on this. Oh. Thank you so much for the cough drop. Thank you. So using computed fields, while this is not an easy UI task, lets you create a new instance of a field that's actually stored in Drupal, which means now you can filter, sort, and execute on the values of that field rather than just calculating fields on the fly. That was my primer on fields, but forms in general, I want to look at them top down. Drupal's extensibility empowers site architects. Without careful consideration, though, these forms can get out of control. And here's one I don't mind zooming out because it doesn't matter what it looks like. It's a lot of fields, just kind of dumped to the screen. There's some media fields. The checklist actually looks like it's underneath a select list. I think we can do better. We can make this visually more appealing, provide some sort of hierarchy, or reduce the footprint for fields that don't need to be displayed all the time. So starting top to the bottom, actually we're going to do the top and then the bottom. We can alter the add and edit form titles as just a simple way to provide direction to our editors and authors. So by default you might see create news, create article, create page, create landing page. Often this is sufficient. But there are plenty of examples where this just doesn't make sense to the actual intended use of the editorial interface. So instead of create application, how about join our team? Or instead of create timesheet, track your time. Or create alert is set a campus alert message. These are simple form updates, easy programming tasks. And they also apply to the buttons at the bottom. So altering the form submit buttons is another easy way to provide that additional context. So instead of just save, which I think most of your node forms are just going to say save at the bottom, we can say what's the actual action taken. Maybe it's save this draft or create a new draft, submit a proposal, add job to job board, post this to the news feed, providing true interaction that describe what is happening so that your editors feel a little more empowered.
Are you using form alters for those? Or?
In those examples I was. I know in Drupal 7 there were some modules that tried to do it, but it was so much easier for me to keep all my logic in a form alter. And it was just an easy task to hand off to somebody else too. Field group is a module that can organize interfaces in a few different ways. It's a popular module, so in collapsible divs. In this case I have the vertical tabs. I use them less and less as I want to make my editorial interfaces more mobile friendly. But the goal is still the same here. that I want to minimize the amount of fields that are on screen right now for cognitive reasons, or in this case, for organizational reasons. So not only did I minimize the footprint, but I created, in this case, four sections that define something in my summer camps. By default, most of the required fields are in this top tab. Actually, all the required fields are. I know there's an asterisk on the one, but that field's pre-populated. So creating a new event, and to have an event even exist, that's the default state of being. It's the top tab that's open by default. It's the node title and other properties that make up an event. And that's something I'll create when we're starting to book new events. As time goes on, and we need to assign staffing to an event, and notes to our staff, and maybe a location of where they're meeting, or parking information. That's the fourth tab on here. And my camp director, Crystal, she will go in, and she knows that everything that she needs to do on this node is the fourth tab. My business partner, Derek, will click on the registration tab, and he'll fill out the how do you register, what's the price, are there any details, age restrictions for campers, things of that nature. Each person in my organization has their own tab for interacting with this node, and it allows us to work in our own space. This is an easy way of using field groups, but Drupal does allow you to create multiple note edit forms. It's not completely obvious, but it's right there out of the box. So you can create multiple forms if you wanted to literally only show certain fields to certain users. Get into some business logic cases really quick though, so use that with caution. Field description is another obvious win. I like to say every field should have instructions, but sometimes it's a little overwhelming. In this case, I was working on an academic site where they had a number of fields like recommended academic plan, or degree audit, or course check sheet, and I didn't know what the heck these meant, and I found out pretty quickly that not everyone did, or they were confusing which one was which. So providing instructions for every field I say is mandatory unless we find a reason not to. And then I also insist that the folks who are going to use this form are the ones who write the instructions. Otherwise, it sounds like a programmer faking it every time. Field permissions is one that I use lightly. It provides some granular control, so a user, probably based on their role, has access to that field, either to view it, to edit it, or maybe it's hidden completely. In this case, I'm using it for our time cards for our summer camp staff. So there is a pay rate field, and of course, folks would love to edit their own pay rate, but they don't have that ability. Only my camp director can edit your pay rate, but you can view your pay rate. And if you are not if you are looking at something else, you can't view other folks' pay rate if for some reason there was an aggregate of personal information. So field permissions is a module that you can get that granular control. I will often, if there are just small one-off cases, go that form alter method to maybe disable or completely remove a field because field permissions can slow down your site. It's just one more thing that hooks into the system that has to be managed as views are building and things of that nature. So I use these with caution. And then client-side validation. Validation plugins take just 2 pieces of code in Drupal. I would say it's a medium-size intro project. And it's pretty easy. So for an example of, I should have had a screenshot for this. For one example would be if a page can only have one type of paragraph if another type of paragraph is on that. You can add a custom validation to your paragraph field that says you're allowed to use paragraph A only if you also are using paragraph B. Or paragraph C can only be used if it's the very bottom one in the list. Those are easy validations to add. There's a lot of examples online, or hit me up and we can talk about it. But I've loved it because I don't need to write and train as much. You put some instructions on how to use this site page, and then as a gentle reminder, when someone violates the business logic, we have a little red warning that says, sorry, you can't do this with this page. You always have to put the intro at the top. So just an example of how you can add custom validation. Of course, the sky's the limit. There's a lot of validation. And I found that most fields I add for content editors, I could think of some validation. So use it with a light touch. Otherwise, folks will get frustrated and just jump out of your site very quickly. Also on enhancing forms, it's just the form. I keep saying that. So you can add CSS and JavaScript to it. This is an example of a select list that we are adding some color swatches from our theme, from our components. And so as you're picking the appearance of this object, you get these color swatches. In this talk, I used to talk about previewing content, and I've come to believe that I don't like content previews. I like representations of what your content does. Previews just seem wrong to me, especially in a world where robots are reading your pages more than anything else. And not just search robots, it might be an Alexa speaker. So I try not to get hung up on what the content looks like on the back end. And in that case, I'm often thinking more content as an API or content first. But there are times it matters, how is it going to present? So in this case, we used a bunch of ice cream flavors from the local creamery to define the different color schemes of the site. And as you clicked on each select list, we appended this little bit of CSS to the page. Oh, what happens after you click save? Submit that job post, whatever you rename that link to. Often, this will take you to view the node itself, or if you have a workflow system, it might take you to a list of all the nodes that you're editing, or nodes that are published pending review. That's not always the case. Sometimes you want to redirect users to somewhere more meaningful. So on a job board, it might take you to a thank you page. Or for a ticketing system that I just mentioned we made a couple of years ago, someone would submit a ticket. It was often the help desk staff that would submit ticket after ticket after ticket for everyone who had walk-ins that day, had questions. So you submit a ticket, it takes you to the add another ticket page. So keep that in mind. You can use Drupal's, I want to say rules will do this, but if not, it's easy to add a redirect on form submit, and you can take them to a more useful location. And my last one on embracing forms is, this is form display modes, and in this case it's a paragraph. So we use paragraphs often to match our design components to the content structure in Drupal. And it's a great system, but it often means that we have nested components, maybe a paragraph inside a paragraph, or a large number of fields. And when you look at this natively in a Drupal interface, and I believe this is the 42 theme, it just kind of dumps all the content to the screen. It's very hard to look at and almost impossible to rearrange your paragraphs because their footprint's so large. In this case, we've defined new paragraph preview modes. So just like a page is a teaser mode, a paragraph can have a preview mode. And we've told the paragraphs UI, I think this is the experimental paragraph widget, you say use the view mode of preview when showing the paragraphs, and we're able to curate what each one of those look like. So in the case of the left, there's a series of image cards where the images actually are so big you can't see all three of them in my screenshot. But on the right-hand side, we turn that into an icon, and we move the related associated text to the right of that image. What's nice is not only is it a small area, but it kind of fits that narrative of, well, what does this content look like as a model? So I see 3 segments of content and what's associated with them. And then I can see the next paragraph, the next paragraph. The next ones actually don't have images, so we've just used a little bit of CSS that says put a left border on each section, each subsection of content. We found that this was making our training easier, and it certainly made the user experience of, in this case, paragraphs a lot easier to work with. And my last topic, and I can do a whole session on this one for sure, so I'm not going to do it justice. I should say we should go out for a pint later if you want to hear more about it. But editorial workflows. And this reflects your roles and the life cycle of your content in Drupal. There are, loading. Well, I'll just speak from memory.
Problems viewing videos during the conference.
Gotcha. Well, this is not a video. So I'm just going to talk about what I think is on this slide. The Workbench module is one out-of-the-box solution for creating editorial workflows. What's nice about Workbench is it has been around in the Drupal community for a long time, and so it's a very consistent experience. It creates a dashboard, creates a set of actions that are familiar to your user, and you can enable Workbench on many sites and feel confident that users who've used it before will figure out this new one. Workbench is nice in that it's a sort of instantly pluggable experience, and you're good to go. But as soon as you want to start to customize more, that's when I work on the Workflows module, Workflows with an S, as opposed to Workflow. And you can experiment with both those, but I like the one with the S. This allows you to create states and transitions, define actions and events that happen when content transitions from those places. And we'll see if the slide loads. But I would say the most important thing for workflows is when you start to go down this path of defining editorial tools for managing changing content, you will take on a lot more responsibility than you may have originally bargained for. You are now responsible for creating a mechanism to show what changed, because you might have someone approving that content. So that's fine. We talked about dashboards. Someone logs in and says, here are 5 pages pending review. I need to have a way to do a difference of those pages. And there's a diff module, DIFF, that kind of points you in the right direction, but it's going to leave a lot to you to set up and probably alter to make it useful. Notifications are another thing that go along with workflows. So if something is pending review, you would hate to have to tell folks, well, submit it for review and then email so-and-so and they'll approve your changes. So instead of having automatic notifications sent out, you can create rules in Drupal on this using the rule system. And I believe Workbench moderation has a subset of modules that will send out notifications. You have to double check. I don't use Workbench too often. The last one is just that dashboard experience. You will now have a new system of roles, users, and permissions that you have to manage because you've allowed for this editorial workflow to be a part of your site. So don't approach it lightly, and know that there are at least 2 good solid projects to get started. Roll it out with some caution. Oh darn, those slides never ran. Oh, locks. Content locks was another one I think about with workflows. When someone's making changes, you might need a way to moderate whether or not other folks can make changes on that content. And there is a content lock module, or maybe lock module. So to end, I have something a little preachy. Like I said, I didn't want this to just be a module roundup. And it's just that in an increasingly competitive market, there's high expectations of what Drupal's going to be. There's a lot of competitors that are doing a fantastic job, many of them only developing in the last couple of years. So I encourage you to meet with your users, find out what their stories are, how they use the site or how they expect it to work, discover their frustrations and work around and share them with this community. Together we're going to build applications that our clients are going to love, and we just have to share our lessons learned with each other. So thank you so much for that. And do you have any questions? Yes, sir.
I just built a site and I made these mistakes of making things required fields. The likelihood that the other data is already there is like low because there's nothing on the site yet. And so how do you go about making it easy for people to add the entities that they need that are required for a form? Is there a module that'll allow you to like make pop-up entity fields or?
I'm not entirely sure I understand. So you have a bunch of required fields.
I made a bunch of required fields. Those required fields are entity references to other content types.
Gotcha.
So, but those other content types may not already
They don't exist.
System. So how do you go about making it so that they can add the content type without leaving the page?
Sure. There is a module that has a long history called inline entity forms that I've used regularly.
I'm sorry, called what?
Inline entity forms, IEF, I believe is the project namespace. It's not abandoned, but I believe it was unsupported for many years, although I've heard rumors someone was taking it back over. So does anyone have any updates?
It's back in GA.
Excellent.
I don't remember, I think it might be called something different.
Okay. So take a look at that. My case for that was when I was working on that web conference site, I had an entity type called session and an entity type called presenter. And of course, it wouldn't make sense to fill out a bunch of presenters and then fill out the session. It was just one form. So while creating the session, there was an inline entity form for adding a new presenter.
If your users can create the content that needs to be referenced, you can use it's a module that lets you create and edit reference entities within the form.
Entity embed?
Yeah, and it gives you a little create and edit button on where you would add the entity reference, and you actually leave the node that you're working on, do your thing, and then when you hit save, it brings you back into the node before it's saved. So
that's the embed?
Entity embed or any marker or any entity embed. But it's really slick. It's great.
Repeat that back to the microphone
And
here.
and then when you're in one node, you can easily edit the node that it's referenced to without having to go
Or you can
on a
The
certain.
embed is more for CK editor. Is it possibly there's another?
Yeah, maybe.
Inline entity.
I'm going to look up those as well.
It is, that's the one.
Yeah, it's inline entity form. You can create the entities from that existing new content. It creates like a modal that pops up with required form and content.
Any other questions? Yes.
How do you, if you need to move a description on a field, on a say a node field edit form, it's default way down below, and sometimes you need to have it up between the title and the
Sure.
and the.
This has been the bane of my existence because it's where I start showing that Drupal jargon again, where I say, oh, well, this is a form element. Elements have one description, and the description is at the bottom of the field. That's in Drupal core. It's always there. No one should have to learn that, though, and it's unfortunate that there isn't a way yet to move it to the top. So let's come up with a custom way to do it. If I have to do it,
it was clunky.
my easiest solution as one-off cases is I usually have that field group module on, and I will place the field in the group can have a description, and then the description sits above the field. Gets the job done. Yes?
Yeah, we talk about node and user being unfortunate words, but they appear in the URL paths. Is there any way to replace them in the URL paths with something friendlier?
There certainly are. I don't know. I would want to take that responsibility. The best thing you can do is create your own interfaces for any of the actions that a user would take. I will often disable the /content silo of menu links for users and create a brand new section in the admin menu that might just be called editors or editorial or the client's name. And I will put my own links to everything in that section so they just don't have to go to the default Drupal interfaces. That's the best suggestion I have because it could get messy otherwise. Anything else? Well, thank you so much.